Thank you for joining us, and all welcome. Thank you all for joining our Be Women Weekly webinars, where we connect, we share, we learn what is important to us, especially in the midst of these very challenging times of isolation or partial isolation. But it's a unique opportunity for us to actually reimagine our future, reimagine our personal lives, ourselves. What are we going to do professionally? And most important, what as global citizens, what are we going to do and what are we going to stand for? So I'm Laura Giadorou, Koch, founder of Be Women, a lawyer in the state of New York and Argentina, and passionate about the movement of using business as a force for good. This webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, and you will be absolutely inspired in a big way. Riane Eisler is our speaker today, a visionary. She is ahead of her time, and she's really transforming the world, where she's creating actual change for human rights, for women and children. She's a transformer of organization, policies, and people worldwide. And you will see it because in her recent book, Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Shapes Our Brain and Lives and the Future, it's an example of what matters as people. She also is very well known for her bestseller book called Chalice and the Blade, translated in practically more than 40 languages. And today we will focus on her book that she wrote not too long ago and re-edited, called The Real Wealth of Nation, A Caring Economy. That was, listen to this, was hailed by Nobel Peace Laureate Desmond Tutu as the template for a better world we have been so urgently seeking for. The Real Wealth of Nation, her book, is a must-read for everybody. So just a few more seconds. Be Women, who are we? We are a global network of women entrepreneurs that seek to balance purpose and profits towards a more caring economy. And Riane will be the one defining it for us. And just a few more seconds, Riane, before you go in, let me share Be Women Empowering Move. That is to put your shoulders back, feel the energy. We want you to be very focused because what you hear today is very inspiring. Chin up, your eyes that twinkle with joy and determination because you will hear great stuff, and with a big smile. Riane, the line is all yours.
Well, thank you, Laura, and welcome everyone. I hope that you can hear me, and quiero también decir bienvenidas, aunque hablaremos en inglés. Veo que hay mucha participación de la América Latina y de España. That was my little bit in Spanish for those who don't speak Spanish. But of course, we'll be doing this in English. And I'm just delighted to be with you today. And I'm going to turn it back to Laura.
Well, please give us your definition of what is the caring economy, and then I will start, in the meantime, the PowerPoint.
Yes. And by the way, about the PowerPoint, Laura has kindly offered to be the one who actually changes the slides, but has asked me to raise my hand. Can you see me? Because I can't see the panel for some reason.
So now you see the PowerPoint, no?
Yes. Now you see the PowerPoint.
Excellent.
And so even if you see me, if I raise my hand, it's not to wave to you, although it would be nice to wave to you, but it's to ask Laura to please change the slide. And I will answer your question. Because yes, I did coin the term caring economics. That's the subtitle, actually, creating a caring economics of my book, The Real Wealth of Nations. And as you see there, but how I can define it, the elevator speech, is that unlike either capitalism or socialism, this is really a whole systems economics that focuses primarily on what is really not the focus. In fact, it's considered externalities in our current economic thinking, caring for people starting in childhood and caring for our Mother Earth. And if we start with that, then as you will see in the course of today, we have a much more humane, much more environmentally sustainable, and much, much more economically effective, yes, economically effective system.
Oops. Oops. There you go. Sorry.
So that is what I'm going to be talking with you about today. And I'm going to invite you to join me because, you know, Einstein said it, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them by really, for a moment, but I hope for more than a moment, that after this you will really change your thinking, to think, to leave behind our comfort zones of conventional categories like right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, and join me in looking at our past, present, and the possibilities for our future from a different perspective. So next. But before I do that, I want to start on a personal note because people always want to know what led me to this work, to decades now of really re-examining human society, human possibilities. And I have a great deal of passion for this. And that passion is deeply rooted in my own early experiences as a Holocaust survivor. You see my photo there when I was a little girl in Vienna. We escaped, my parents and I escaped by a hair's breadth, really, just by a miracle, which I explain in other places. But to make a long story short, we had to leave in the middle of the night, only carrying what we could carry. And I grew up in the industrial slums of Havana because my parents had the means, fortunately, before we had to leave everything behind, to purchase entry permits to Cuba, one of only two places, Shanghai and Havana, that let Jewish refugees, or any refugees really, from Nazi Europe in. And those were, of course, traumatic experiences, not only witnessing cruelty and injustice in Europe, but also really experiencing and witnessing how the enormous disparities in wealth, in living of Cuba at that time under Batista, you know, with so many people living in terrible poverty, as we did until my parents were able to get on their feet again. And they led to questions, questions that I'm going to need the next slide. Questions that, well, since we humans have such a capacity for consciousness, caring, and creativity, why has there been so much cruelty, insensitivity, and destructiveness? And that eventually, led to my research and also to my writing, to quite a few books, including, of course, as Laura mentioned, the first book from this research was The Chalice and the Blade. The most recent is Nurturing Our Humanity, which was published by Oxford University Press just a few months ago. And I really, really recommend it. I recommend all my books. But what I'm going to be talking with you about is really the basis for that was laid in the real wealth of nations, creating a caring economics. And could you give me the next slide? And this economics really takes us, as I said, into new thinking, to a caring economics of partnerism. And why? Why is this so important? Well, if you really think about it, and the present COVID-19 crisis has made it very clear. And by the way, if we had a caring economics, the impact wouldn't be, I mean, there would still be an impact, obviously, but it wouldn't be quite as dire. But the COVID crisis made it clear that we need both government policies and a market. But neither, as I said earlier, capitalism theory or communist theory recognizes something essential, the economic value of caring policies and practices, the kinds of economic practices and economic system that you, so many of you as bee women, who actually know we need because you care about people and nature. But to do this, we really have to understand what has kept us back. And next, please. Well, all right, I've already said this. We need policies that recognize the economic value of the work of caring for people and for nature. If you look at the old economic map, which is the conventional map, both in terms, from socialism and for capitalism, you see that the three life-sustaining sectors, I mean, they're fundamental. The natural economy, the household economy, the unpaid community, a volunteer economy, they're just simply are not part of it. So can I have the next? So what we need really, and what I've proposed, and you can see it in this slide, is a full spectrum economic map. And this is not only essential for human and for environmental reasons, but for purely economic reasons. And I really want to briefly emphasize this, because in our knowledge service, new technology, economy, what do economists and other leaders keep telling us? That the most important capital is what they like to call high quality human capital. Well, we know from not only psychology, but now also from neuroscience, and that's very much a part of my new book, by the way, Nurturing Our Humanity. We know from neuroscience that whether or not we have these flexible people who can learn and who can work with others, quickly adapt to new circumstances, including new technological circumstances or even a pandemic, whether this is or not produced largely hinges on the quality of care and education children receive early on. So, in other words, it hinges on the work that in both capitalist and socialist theory is relegated to just, quote, reproductive rather than productive work, whereas in reality, it is the most productive work. As you can see, flexible, creative, empathic people, quote, high quality human capital leads to economic success in our post-industrial age. But this takes us to an underlying problem. And can we have the next slide, please? Which is that we have to really make it visible if we're going to have a more, caring and sustainable and effective economic system. And this is that at the time when capitalism was developed, which was the 1700s, by the way, very early industrial times, or Marx wrote in the 1800s, again, early industrial times, and we're now in the 21st century post-industrial age. So on that basis alone, these theories would be antiquated. But even beyond that, and this is really, really important, for both capitalism and socialism, the work of care, yes, caring for people's health, caring for children, uh, caring for people in families, as well as keeping a clean and healthy uh, home environment, which then of course translates, doesn't it, into a clean and healthy planetary environment. For them, that was just women's work to be performed by women in male-controlled households, so much so. And we really need to know our history. Uh, when Marx even wrote, in most places, as in some places still today, women's work in both the market and in the home was legally the property of their fathers and husbands. So much so that if a woman was, and most women married, and there were no other avenues here, if a woman was negligently injured, she could not sue for these injuries. Consider only her husband could for loss of her services. That was the thinking at that time. Now, and all of this, of course, takes us back to what I started with, the need for new language, for new social and economic categories. Because consider, linguistic psychologists have long told us that the categories, and especially now social categories, provided by our language channel our thinking, so that really it's very difficult to even image other possibilities, which is why a colleague of mine has called conventional social categories, right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, weapons of mass distraction, because they fragment our consciousness. I mean, just consider, and this is really critical, and it's particularly important for B women and for all women and all enlightened men to know this, that these categories, like most studies of society, pay scant, if any, attention to the majority of humanity, women and children. And obviously, if we only look at just a little corner, part of a picture, and leave the rest out, well, we don't see the whole picture, which makes it impossible to see patterns, configurations. And can I have the next slide, please? And these configurations are the configurations of the domination system and the partnership system, and I'll explain what that's all about in a minute. But the main point that I want to make at this moment about this is that these new categories recognize what we today know from psychology and also from neuroscience. As I said, that what children first experience and observe directly impacts how our brains develop, and hence how people think, feel, and act, including how they vote and how they work. And it is really largely through gender and through observing and experiencing also childhood relations and gender relations that children first learn what's considered normal, what's considered moral, even inevitable, which explains things that otherwise make no sense. Why is it, for example, that whether for Hitler's rightist Western society, secular, whether for Stalin's leftist Western secular society, or for both Eastern and Western religious fundamentalist societies and leaders, a top priority is always, has been, either preserving or imposing or going back to an authoritarian, rigidly male-dominated, highly punitive, quote, traditional family. It's just a code, isn't it, traditional, for this kind of family. And that is where children's brains, before their brains have developed, much less their critical faculties are fully formed, kids learn that one kind of human, is more valued than another kind of human, beginning with the male superior, female inferior map of our species. You can then apply that to another ethnicity, another religious sect, like Shia versus Sunni or Sunni versus Shia, to another race, black, white, black. It doesn't really matter. And they also learn another key lesson, and really this is important for us to understand, which is that they have to go into denial about the pain and the anxiety and the fear that is, characteristic of these families, because if they disobey orders, no matter how unjust, it's going to be very, very, very painful. And that, of course, prepares them to fit into domination system. Now, consider that this, can I go have the next slide, please? Next slide. That, no, I go back to women. Now, women are half of humanity. And so if women are discriminated against in the workplace and the home, in some developing nations, I think you probably know that girls are given less food, less health care, certainly less education. And if women must do the care work for free, or in the home, or for poverty wages in the market, all this will have a negative effect, of course, not only on women, but on everyone, on the whole standard of living. And indeed, this has been showed by studies that we did. I don't have it here, but I will ask Laura to provide you in a follow-up perhaps, with well, you can find it on our website at centerforpartnership.org, in a study that we did at the Center for Partnership Studies way early, women, men, and the global quality of life, that the status of women is a powerful predictor of everyone's status of life. But the reason for that is not only that women are half of humanity, obviously, but next slide, please. But that, as I said, it's the dynamics of partnership and domination systems and their effect on what is and is not economically and, of course, culturally valued. And as I said, because domination systems have a gendered system of values in which caring, caregiving, and nonviolence are devalued as soft, as feminine, whether it is in women, in men, or in social and economic policies. So, as you see, there never seems to be enough money for anything considered soft or, quote, feminine, stereotypically. This has nothing to do with women or men inherently, like caring for children, caring for people's health, keeping a clean and healthy environment. So you have these priorities, whereas in partnership systems, and I'll get to that, I mean, it's always a matter of degree. There's a partnership domination social scale where women are highly valued. Men, as the status of women, men also begin to embrace more feminine activities, or stereotypically feminine activities, like all the men who are today caring for babies, feeding them, diapering them. This could never have happened in a rigid domination society, but feminine policies and priorities become the norm. And yes, there's a higher investment in caring for humans and nature. And if you take nothing else away, please take this away with you, because if women are going to succeed, We have to address this. We have to make it visible. And as I also said, the economic effects are really dire in a post-industrial age when so much of whether we are or are not able to have this quote high quality human capital is hinges on the quality of, on this women's work, stereotypical women's work, as I said, whether done by women or men. And we must see to it, and I'll get back to that, that it is supported by social and economic policy. So I want to now move to, I'm just giving you a lot of information quickly. Yes, this repeats what I've already said, that we know this from, quote, hard science, neuroscience, which, that's why Nurturing Our Humanity really is such an important book. And I hope you will all use it. But anyway, if we go to the slide after that, so I want to give you 5 steps that we can take now to move to a new economics that can meet our unprecedented global environmental, social, and economic challenges. And the first step I've already touched on. Recognize that we really must go beyond socialism and capitalism to a caring economics of partnerism. That does not mean, by the way, that we want to throw out, so to speak, the baby with the bathwater. We want to retain the partnership elements of both markets. We don't have a free market. It would be nice to have one. But, with these mega corporations and these government preference given to them, it's a mess. But we also need enlightened government policies, but we really have to go, which is presumably one of the tenets of socialism, where although in both China and the former Soviet Union, the mass application of socialism was, as you know, a human, environmental, ecological disaster. But anyway, so, but the whole point I want to make here is that we have to go further. And this is a new economics that recognizes that, yes, the real wealth of nations is not financial. And do you see that now with the stock market and what it's doing? Up, down, sideways, seems to have no relation to the number of deaths there are, to what's happening. It's sort of completely disconnected, isn't it? That a nation's real wealth consists of the contributions of people and of nature. So we need what we have not had. And again, please, this is a vital thing, that you as bee women and as enlightened women and men of all kinds really can make happen. Because, as I said, economics are human creations, right? We can change them. We need economic rules, practices, and policies that give visibility and real value to actually the most important human work. Caring for people starting in early childhood, caring for our Mother Earth, which in the real wealth of nations, I've called a caring economics of partnerism. But I want to make an important point, and please let's go to the next slide, which is what, well, I've already said that. This is the slide I want, thank you. It's really not capitalism or markets that we need to leave behind. We need exchange of goods, we need markets. It is domination economics, whether it's ancient or modern, Eastern. Think about the old Chinese empire, the Indian caste system, Middle Eastern sheiks and chiefdoms, whether it's Western, as in feudal or mercantilist times. Really today's mega corporations are the new fiefdoms, aren't they, on a global scale? And also you begin to see from, if you take this perspective that what we're trying to leave behind is this domination economics, what you see is that the so-called trickle-down economics, of neoliberalism, what is it? It's really a continuation of the same mindset, the same paradigm of feudal times, of economic domination, where those at the bottom are supposed to content themselves with the scraps, right? Falling from the opulent tables of those on top. We have to leave that behind. And that really requires a new thinking that goes beyond both socialism and capitalism. The next slide, please, is the second tip. Recognize the interconnection of economic and social systems. Economic systems, just like families or religion or politics or economics, they don't arise out of thin air. They're embedded, aren't they? They're part of a larger set of institutions, of a social system. And they're very different depending on the degree to which that system orients to either the domination or partnership side of the scale. Now, the good news, and I'll have the next slide, please, is that we really don't have to start from scratch. If you think of the last several hundred years, we have had one social movement after another. No, let's go back. That has been challenging the same thing, a tradition of domination. And this means we've been really moving towards partnership again. And I say again, because those of you familiar with my books such as The Chalice and the Blade, Sacred Pleasure, or any of my books for that matter, but those books go into detail, that for millennia, for the vast, vast majority of the time that we humans lived on this earth, we had our original cultural direction was in a partnership rather than domination direction. And yes, that meant that women, they were not matriarchies. I mean, think about it. Our language, I'm going to digress for a minute. It only gives us matriarchy or patriarchy, does it? Which really is a domination system. There is no partnership alternative. These were societies in which women were not devalued, but men also were not devalued, okay? So, all right. So if you really, let's go through some of these movements because it's very empowering and very important for us to understand this. I mean, if you think of the European Enlightenment, of the so-called rights of man movement, it challenged the so-called divinely ordained right of kings to rule, their quote subjects. If you think of the feminist movement, it challenged another tradition of domination, the so-called divinely ordained right of men to rule women and children in the so-called castles of their homes. That mentality, that enemy mentality, right? Have a castle, a military metaphor. If you think of all of the movements for economic justice, they challenged traditions of top-down rule. If you think of the abolitionists, the civil rights, the anti-colonial movements, what did they challenge? The so-called divinely ordained, again, everything was divinely ordained, right? Right of a so-called superior race to rule over inferior ones. The pacifist movement, and then later the peace movement, and this now more recently, and this is really important, it's essential for real systems change, to end the movement to end intimate violence, because there is a pandemic, as many of you know, of violence against women in homes globally that really has only recently been recognized.
Can I say something there? We truly believe this is so important. And so many women and men are asking, what is this happening? That is more than 30% of violence in domestic violence has increased since isolation. And the cost of this to a country is humongous. In the US, in the UK is like 8 billion euros. In the US is beyond 10 billion. Just every year spending on women's on violence and domestic violence.
Well, and of course, violence, whether it's intimate or international, is a means of control, of domination, isn't it? That runs through the whole domination system. But remember the neuroscience, and I really want to look. I wrote the first paper for the Human Rights Quarterly back in 1987 on what has since become known as women's rights as human rights. And I have also called, and I'd love to have Be Women really be engaged with me in this, in a piece that I wrote for a Cambridge University Press book recently called Protecting the Majority of Humanity, yes, women and children. I have called for either the reinterpretation or the amendment of the Rome Statute of international human rights, on crimes against humanity, to include what they don't include: women and children, gender, and childhood. I mean, it's crazy, but I'm going to digress for a moment here, because it's really important. If you went to university, but it permeates the whole culture. I woke up one day and I realized that in everything that I had been taught in so-called higher education, and I've got a lot of that, there had hardly been anything by, about, or for people like me, women. I mean, just think about it. Women and children are marginalized. Out of 600 years of so-called modern Western science, only 50 years ago did we start to have women's studies, men's studies, gender studies, queer studies. And it's still marginalized in our universities. They're so siloed. And neuroscience, what we know from neuroscience, what I've briefly alluded to, but really want to emphasize, that's also siloed in some psychology or neuroscience course. It should be part of sociology, of political science. But anyway, I want to return to what I want to share with you. But this is really important for us to understand, that both women and men come by this ignorance of a whole picture honestly, because that's what has been perpetuated as important knowledge and truth from generation to generation. But as I was saying, challenging traditions of violence is a domination tradition. And look, if you really think about it, the environmental movement actually challenges another tradition of domination, our so-called conquest of nature, that at our level of technological development, with climate change, with extinction of species, God knows what we're doing here. It really could do us in, couldn't it? So, but this is very important, and I really will go to the next slide in a moment. If you look at these, no, let's not go there yet. Let's stay with the movements for a moment. If you look at these movements, you see something very interesting. Most of the effort and energy has gone and continues to go to dismantling the top of the domination pyramid. Politics, economics as conventionally defined, with far, far less attention to foundational matters, like really on which domination systems keep rebuilding themselves in regression after regression, which is, of course, childhood and gender relations, the majority of humanity. And if you read my books, you'll see that there is a real connection between these regressions we're seeing worldwide today and being pushed back to a normative ideal of the, quote, traditional, rigidly male-dominated, highly punitive, authoritarian family. All right, now finally, Laura, we can go to the next slide, which is step 3. And of course, we have to debunk this old idea that caring policies are not economically effective, as many women know from their own experiences. And study after study shows. I'll show you in the next slide some examples from the real wealth of nations. Think about it. I mean, what do child care backup programs, 521% return on investment after 4 years, over 100%. I mean, it's huge. And we have the data. It is really the companies that are regularly listed in either Working Mothers or in Fortune 500 companies have a substantially higher return to investors. As we're also finding out that companies that have a woman on the board, and it's not that women are better than men, but women are taught that we are supposed to care for people, right? I mean, now we're beginning to change the gender socialization, and this is very, very important. But anyway, and I really want to say it's not just businesses that have caring policies that do better. Nations that have caring policies do better. Could I have, yes. If you look at nations like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, now I really have to say that these nations at the beginning of the 21st century were so poor there were famines. You know, whole US states, Minnesota, were populated by refugees, right, from these nations. Today, they are invariably in the highest ranks of the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness reports. That's right. And a major reason for this is that they pioneered caring policies, such as high quality child care and accessible to people with good pay for child care workers in the United States. I mean, child care workers, they earn less, according to US Labor Department statistics, than dog walkers or parking lot attendants. I mean, I love dogs, but children,
Yeah.
you know, I mean.
Our most important asset is our kids, our future. And, you know, if you pay $10 an hour for a caretaker and for a plumber who has a license and who gets paid at least 5 or 10 times more, how is that? Maybe a license for caretakers should be part of the situation, because we leave our kids in the hands of someone who's not skilled. And maybe we should, because it reflects, as you say, the society we're going to live in.
And I want to add to that the whole teaching profession in Finland, for example, it is the most honored profession. Kids want to be teachers. Why? We recognize the importance of these relationships. Yes, the thing that we're taught as women, we have to be the guardians of. But think about their policies. They have universal health care, stipends to help families care for children, elder care with dignity, generous paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers, and it goes with it. They have solar and clean power. They're way ahead of other nations in it. Now, they're not ideal societies, okay? But they do have a generally good living standard for all, low poverty and crime rates, high longevity. They're always on the top of the happiness ratings. And, well, they show the enormous ROI, return of investment, in caring for our most important assets, people and nature. But, and this is vital, again, I mean, we have to start connecting the dots, including the dots to the invisible parts of the society that, you know, we've been taught are marginal or ignored. This happened because these nations are really moving closer to the partnership side of the partnership domination scale. And I want to really go through that. And can I have the next slide, please? Because we need to understand these configurations. These things don't happen in isolation. Instead of this authoritarian top-down rule in both the family and state, in these nations there is more democracy and equality in both the family and the state. In contrast to domination systems where these rigid rankings, are backed up by fear or force, these nations have been in the forefront, yes, in the forefront of working to leave behind traditions of violence. The first, the first peace studies came out of Sweden. The first laws that say that it's against the law to use physical discipline against children, violence basically, came out of these nations, and it is slowly spreading so that even here in the United States, which is way backward, the American Psychological Association recently stated, look, it is harmful to children to spank them, okay? But these nations pioneered that. They have a strong men's movement to disentangle, quote, masculinity from its domination equation with domination and violence, which takes me to a very important part. The rigid ranking of the male half of humanity over the female half, and with it, the so-called masculine traits and activities, like conquest, domination over feminine ones like caregiving and nonviolence, that's characteristic of what we've inherited in domination systems. And as we move to the partnership side, we see it happening, but not enough and not without an understanding of how it connects to the whole social system. These are not just women's issues or just quote, just gender issues. These are key social issues. More equal partnership between women and men in both the family and the state, and then everyone, including men, can embrace caring values as key human values. So I know I'm sharing a lot of connections with you that are not generally made, but I'm going to say to you that we have to make them, because it's only as the status of women rises that men no longer find it such a threat to their so-called masculinity, their identity, to embrace stereotypically feminine traits, activities, and policies. So men too vote for more caring policies in these nations that sometimes call themselves caring
If you
societies.
can have more pizza, please.
Oh, can I just continue with one point?
Yes, sure.
Because I wanted to just say something which I think is really important. Contrary to what we are sometimes told, all this happened not because these are relatively small, homogeneous societies, because there are many other small, homogeneous societies that are very domination-oriented. I mean, just think about it. But also, and these are not socialist nations. I repeat, yes, they have some enlightened caring policies, calling themselves very often caring societies. They have a very healthy market economy, and they're very innovative, all right? So we have to leave, because a lot of these explanations, sort of explaining away these Northern European nations, reinforce the domination paradigm, don't they? So we have to be prepared to say, wait a minute, look at other societies, look at the market economy, which is so good there. But anyway, I want to go now to step 4, and somebody wanted to say something. So if you want to, by all means, but maybe we can later, after I'm through, because I'm almost through, talk first about step 4, which this is essential, because we not only need a new way of thinking, we need tools to get to the partnership side. And one of the major tools, and we're working on this at the Center for Partnership Studies, is changing our measures of economic health. I mean, if, next slide, please. If you really think about it, GDP is a crazy measure. I mean, it includes activities that actually harm and take life as, quote, productive work. So making cigarettes, the resulting medical costs, funeral costs, they're all great for GDP. You know, fast foods, same thing. Oil spills, oh my gosh, I mean, the cleanup costs, the depositions, they all are on the plus side of GDP. But not only, can I have the next slide, does GDP include negatives as positives, it does not count the economic value of the life-sustaining activities of these three sectors that I have proposed must be included: the household, natural, and community volunteer sectors of the economy. So, and by the way, well, some people will tell you you can't quantify this work. And yeah, you can't quantify the value of all of it, but you can quantify its economic value. And recently, an Australian report showed that if the caring work, mostly performed still by women in households, were counted, it would constitute, it's an Australia study, it would constitute 50%, 50% of the Australian GDP. I mean, that's huge. But it's not taught in our universities, it's not taught in our schools. So it's up to you to see that it is, so that all of these people who graduate with economics, you know, as economists, have a clearer picture of what is and is not productive work. All right, so this problem of metrics, because I want to return to that, can I have the next slide, is why we at the Center for Partnership Studies, well, I already said that it can be quantified, you know, and have in 2014, with a grant from the Koch Foundation, we launched a whole new set of economic indicators, which are really, really important. These indicators differ from GDP and from most so-called GDP alternatives, is that they are, first of all, geared to our knowledge service era. They show that the most effective approach to developing human capacity, and with this a good quality of life, is supporting care and education in early childhood and throughout life. And yes, that a healthy natural environment is key to human development. But they also differ from most so-called GDP alternatives in that, and this is really important, they not only measure out, you know, the inputs. Well, this is reversed. No, actually, it's okay. Outputs, which are, you know, human capacity. They also measure inputs. How much does a nation invest in caring for people, starting in childhood, in caring for our natural environment? And this is very, very important. Policies, because it will give policymakers and the public what has been lacking, really, which is what they should consider, and this is longitudinal, long term, to develop, to invest resources, money, in cost-effective ways. Now, what we really have to understand is the connection between these two. For example, the social wealth economic indicators show that the United States invests less than half than any other developed nation in family-friendly policies, less than half. And not coincidentally, we have the highest infant mortality, maternal mortality, and child poverty rate of any OECD nation, with 1/5 of our children growing up in poverty. So this is essential to connect the dots. And the point that I want to make with you right now is that we are now, with another grant, developing, some economists are developing a social wealth index, one number, because the social wealth economic indicators are 24 numbers. And that's a lot to ask of policymakers to look at 24 indicators. So we're updating and consolidating them. And I want to invite all of you to really join with us in this. So that, can I have the next slide? Which is really the next step, which is joining together to support caring policies. I think we must support the social wealth index, but we also want to support, and can I have the next slide, the caring policies that are investments in human capacity, paid sick and parental leave, childcare and early childhood education, good nutrition for children, higher pay and status for caregivers and teachers, and yes, tax breaks and subsidies for companies that care for people and nature, rather than, as now, the other way around. We're subsidizing in the United States companies that harm us, harm people, harm nature, which is absolutely reality stood on its head. So look, these are all investments that we can make, we must make, but to do them, we have to change thinking. So I want to invite all of you, because there's a lot more I would like to perhaps discuss, but I want to invite all of you to join with us in building, because you're already part of the movement towards a caring economics, really. But we have to do it more consciously and more precisely. So I want to especially invite you to learn more and promote the Social Wealth Index. And here's an email, and here is where you can go, a URL. Because look, as I said, economics, like everything else, they're human creations. We can build an economic system that supports caring for ourselves, others, and our Mother Earth. A caring economics of partnerism. So let's do it. I thank you.
Well, thank you. That was brilliant. And it was really very inspiring. And I think that I would love to open now to questions from the audience. But I will start with one question. If you can be more specific about why is it that the ROI of childcare is so high in studies, and why is it that in the United States or developed countries still not having, what is the blockage in mindsets that is not permitting that to move forward? Because I'm sure that they see oil as productive and effective, and they invest in oil and give tax subsidies, but in childcare they don't. What is the underlying value that is?
It's the gender system of values. Look, I mean, as I said, there always seems to be enough money for the so-called masculine priorities. And again, I want to emphasize, this has nothing to do with men. Men can be more caring than women. Some women are not caring, some men are. But look, there's always money for prisons. Well, what is that? It's the domination stereotype of the punitive male head of household, right? The father as master of the house, okay? There's always money for weapons for wars. All of our epics, the hero as killer, right? But somehow there isn't enough money for caring, feeding children, caring for children. As you said, high quality education. A hungry child cannot learn. And you know, in the United States, the COVID pandemic has made it so clear. When so many children in so many school districts were depending on the school breakfasts and lunches and even dinners to survive. I mean, this rich nation is insane, but it's what we've inherited. And that's why we as women and enlightened men too, we must make this gender system of values visible.
Exactly. And also, if you can discuss more the issue about caring in companies, because now there's a movement of businesses that are more caring. And if you can give us some ROIs on that.
Well, as I said, these businesses, they're still marginalized. That's the problem, because the reward system has to be changed. Businesses that provide, I mean, first of all, we should have universal paid parental and sick leave. Every other developed nation does, okay? And some of them is very long. But companies that provide this should have tax breaks, should have subsidies, rather than the other way around, companies that harm us having subsidies. But it will only happen as people very often say to me, they read my books and something switches in their head. It's like an aha. And I had a lot of those aha moments, by the way, when I was doing the research for this. But we have to help policymakers, thought leaders, and yes, the public at large to really connect the dots. Because if we don't understand what's holding us back, that it's been hammered into us, people who consider themselves progressives have had a lot of schooling, right? Higher education. And as I said, they are used to marginalizing anything connected with women and children. And we've got to really make people understand that, hey, it's not that we're stupid, it's that we've been indoctrinated.
Yeah. That is fascinating. So basically, not only households have to become more caring, companies become more caring, and governments have to become more caring. I think the United States is a very good example of where the money goes. I mean, the percentage of money on arms and armories is huge.
It's crazy. Well, I mean, as a Holocaust survivor, I recognize that in a world with some nations orienting more to the domination side than even the United States by a long shot, actually, I mean, nations where, for example, if you are of a different religious group, you get killed, right? I mean, that we have to have defense. But what we do in the United States is ridiculous, But it's what Eisenhower said, the feeding uh, the military-industrial complex, and we've got to stop doing that. But we can't just do that by itself. There has to be a shift in thinking. And that's what this work is about. And that's where all of you come in, because you already feel it in your gut. Know this. I'm sure that many of you, I mean, I get so much mail from women and men who say, I've always known this somehow. But there were no words, there was no language, there was no conceptual frame.
Yeah. So then, can you give us maybe a step-by-step of how your center is actually moving forwards towards the caring revolution?
Well, we are doing a number of things. First of all, we offer online webinars that are free, and also online courses, which we do require, I mean, we give some scholarships, but we do require some payment for those. And we're in the process now of redesigning them so that they can be self-study on demand rather than meeting at a certain time. We also work with other organizations. For example, we developed a course for the Omega Institute, and many of you know about it. It's in upstate New York, and that course is available now, and I give the course. And it's really about changing our thinking. When I think of how did socialism become a worldwide force, people studied, people met, people discussed. It's very hard today with our barrage of, little sound bites, right? But I'm saying we have to go push back and go back and really connect the dots. And also, of course, the social wealth index development. And we have a lot of resources, by the way. If you go to the website, you can have fast fact sheets showing why we need new. Look, what we don't measure, what's invisible, we're not going to find funding for. I mean, it's just that simple. And if we're going to change the values, we have to show the value of what we want funded. So if you go to our website, you can have fast fact sheets, you can have, you can use this slide deck, I mean, if you want to give your own presentations. I mean, this is not something that
we will provide it to everybody.
Absolutely.
And also, maybe you can share, for example, if we want to vote for a caring politician, what is it that we have to ask a politician? What is it that we have to look into?
My goodness, we have a whole fast fact sheet on that. Some of the questions you should ask politicians. Will you back these caring policies? Will they be a priority for you? Because now with the COVID, we are discovering, of course, that we have to give people money, right? Even, but it should be linked, I think, to care work, because everybody does some care work, and that is important. And I see a question here of Mariana Mazzucato's argument that to achieve transformation, we must reform the modern notion of value, since now value is always a function of price. And I would say, and therefore things that have no price have no value in accounting, all caring work, basically. The social wealth indicators and the social wealth index is a way of changing values. Starting, because you have to start with where people are. You can argue, all that you want, that we should gift all of this and it's fine, but then people have no food, right? Caregivers, I mean, most caregivers who work in the market in the United States, a majority are on welfare because their wages are so low. I mean, you have to start with where the people who control the resources are. And this is where the sways start. Yes, and they do put a price. They say the ROI is very high. Then, once people begin to change values, I mean, I cannot tell you exactly what a caring economics will look like, but I know the foundations, it will include these three life-sustaining sectors and consider what they produce as productive. It will have a priority of caring for people starting in childhood, early. And it will care for nature. I mean, these are basics. And the SWAY and the Social Wealth Index is a basic tool. And I think that people keep, I see so many of these questions. What is the most powerful way to bring about this shift of heart and mind? Yes, I love all of this. And yes, I have seen the caring economy policies being proposed in Hawaii. We're not collaborating with them, but we have alumni. Our influence cannot, see, this is the other thing. Philanthropy is now, especially so-called progressive philanthropy, is moving to this accountability and to this counting, and it's crazy. The people who have funded the regressions do not do that. They fund think tanks, they fund publications, they fund radio and television and social media, because you cannot really, I mean, do the people in Hawaii know my work? Somebody knows it, obviously. But that doesn't mean that we are directly working with them now. But we have alumni from our caring economy course, for example. And I would not be surprised if that is how it started. But I'm not going to waste my time trying to trace the chain.
But can you talk a little more about Mariana Zuccato's argument that in the average, to achieve this transformation, we must reform the modern word of what is value? Because,
absolutely.
And but so, how do we get there? How do we transform value into a different value?
Right. The value of care work rises as women's status and leadership rises. Not because women are better than men, but because the quote feminine becomes more accepted and recognized. We have to understand systems dynamics. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not coincidental that pushing women back, as I said, into their quote traditional place in a quote traditional family, which is a subservient place, is always a priority of those pushing us back. Whether it's in the West or in the East or the North or the South, okay? It's because they go together. Understand that we have inherited not only rigid gender stereotypes, which thank goodness we're beginning to have more fluid notions of gender now. But we have to connect the dots. This is all part of the partnership movement. Yeah. So what I'm going to say to you is this: educate yourself. Really, really understand these connections. And then wherever you are, start with your circle of influence. Start where you are. But join together to support the tool, the Social Wealth Index. Join together politically so that progressives, quote unquote, begin to understand that these so-called women's and children's issues, right, like child care, paid parental leave, paid sick leave, are key social issues. Because the more we support care work, the more we give it value, right?
Exactly.
So it's a dynamic. And
so
there are many entry points, many entry points. Yeah, if you are connected in politics, get the people that you know in politics to really start getting acquainted with this work. If you are, I mean, wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? Because I can't give you a size that will fit all. Everybody will do their own thing. And we have to change academia. I mean, academia is a disaster, the academy.
Where would you start in academia?
Well, I am starting. I'm starting by doing a course for young women academics through a Swiss government agency. But I'm one person. You know, we need all of you to do this.
The same. I mean, yeah, here they even suggest, what about changing accounting systems? Because in our accounting system, even the normal for businesses, many of the values of a company are intangibles. Even yes. Coleman has says that 80% of our value of a company might be not even in the books, like culture, caring, and all these things that are not valued yet, but have to. So how do you start an accounting change?
Well, you look at the social wealth economic indicators and you start using some of those indicators, those 24 indicators, to change accounting systems. I mean, I can't do that, but people in business who can change accounting systems, get some of the accounting. Accounting is very, very important. Get some accountants involved. I mean, when you have a different frame, you change everything. But it has to start with changing your own consciousness.
Wow. That's beautiful said. change your consciousness, and that's when we start to change ourselves, then our family, our community, our companies, our country.
Right.
So on that note, I know there's a few more questions, but we've extended our time quite a bit, but it's so fascinating what you have to say. Maybe we can get one more question in about, anybody has a question, raise your hand, and you, yes, we'll make the slide available. Whoever registered, we will send you an email with a recording of this presentation. And there's a lot of food for thought, what you said, Riane. Would you do some closing remarks just to close this conversation and inspire us?
Well, I'm reading the wonderful chat comments. I mean, you are wonderful. And we as women have been taught that we shouldn't assert ourselves. That, you know, it's great for men to be aggressive, quote unquote, but for a woman, she's a ball breaker. So forget that. I mean, really, this work really is empowering for us. And I think that when half of humanity that has been devalued, yeah, and we've inherited that, when you begin to own your power, anything is possible. So do it.
Okay, we are in, and we'll be absolutely working with you in many ways, maybe in book clubs with your book, so that there's more an incentive to read them.
Great. That's great. That's
yeah.
a wonderful way to start.
Yes, and then so on this note, Be Women is all about taking action now. Be Women now. So what we're going to do is, while I'll tell you a little bit of our next and upcoming webinars, I would like you to get a pen and a piece of paper and write down at least one or two things that you will actually do in the next 5 or 10 minutes based on what you were inspired by Riane. There's so much to do, but at least write it down and get it done, because we need action. Are you going to send an email to your congressperson or to your family or to your company? We need to really create action that matters. So on this note, we want to announce that we are having also webinars, not only in Spanish and English, but also in Italian. Our next one is a May 13th, where we'll talk about a Società Benefit e il B Corp movement by Anna Congo, May 13, the same day. We're going to have another webinar on Value Starts at Home. It is a book written by Eve Rodsky, and really a great book about how you transform your world of values at home in your small circle, and then from there things grow better. So you, Riane, will love this author as well. We also have a few other calls on domestic violence, that is a pandemic within the pandemic, and the cost of domestic violence. These two calls are by professionals that work in the Womanity Foundation, that is focused on that worldwide. We also have other amazing webinars where we have Lara Stein, that is created a global movement called BOMA Global, about creating real change in your community. And we have another ones on Better Together, Standing Strong in Tough Times, that is about the power of mindsets and how to do it together as a family, as a couple. And so there's a lot of really beautiful and inspiring webinars, as well as Oxfam. You know, they have written an amazing work on unpaid and underpaid care, and it's the author of this work is going to be with us at the end of May.